Hi, I'm Steve Green. Welcome back. In this video, I've had a request to look at indirectly triggering plugins, but by that, I believe the request is to some JavaScript, for instance, on the account entity, updates a field on a custom entity, which would then trigger a plugin to do a calculation and store the result in another field on that sort of target entity. So Mark had posed the question that in this example there's a new underscore swim times entity which will have a seconds field and a minutes field, and when one of the source entities updates the record, it will calculate the associated number of minutes. So what I've done is I've took the contact entity, I've created a swimming times section, and obviously I've got to look up to a swimming time record and a number of seconds. So what will happen is you'll put the number of seconds into the contact record, and the associated swimming time record will get updated with that number of seconds, which will then trigger a plugin to calculate a number of minutes. So if I look at a new swimming time record, so it's got obviously a primary field which is the name, which is not business required, so we can ignore that. So the contact value will come from the contact record on change, populate the number of seconds, which will trigger a plugin to calculate the number of minutes. So if I go across to my CRM demo solution, what we will need to do is add a JavaScript library to the contact form, which that was a previous example, sorry. So we could use this same JavaScript library, but for this example I'll create a fresh one. So just to show you the process, so from the package area, if you right click on web resources, add new item, click on JScript file, and then give it a suitable name. So if we call it update swimming time, so that will then add the additional library into the project, and that has my publisher prefix on the front of the name. And I can now right click, well, if I show you CRM first, if I go to the CRM demo solution and look at the web resources area, so we can see the Silverlight application as part of that solution that we haven't been working with, and at the moment we're not looking to do anything with that, and that previous update contact JavaScript library. So if I minimize, bring up my Visual Studio, right click and deploy. Okay, so that's now deployed. So if I go back to my demo solution web resources and refresh, I can shortly see so now I can see the update swimming time library. This is obviously completely blank as per the editor, so if I click on it, won't see any text within it. So now we need to write our JavaScript function. I won't obviously go through the whole process of watching me write that out. I'll pop it on pause and I'll copy and paste it and explain the format. Okay, so what I've done is I've created a JavaScript function called seconds on change. Within it, it defines a new object, which will be the updated entity, sets a number of seconds to the value in the number of seconds field on the contact uses this JSON stringify method to turn it into a valid JSON data object, retrieves the server URL, and then I define the path to the REST endpoint, the OData endpoint, and then I add to that path so it's this. I need to edit a particular record. So it's the swimming time set, which is the data set for my custom entity, which begins obviously prefix my publisher FSO swimming time, and then the GUID, and I retrieve that from the swimming time lookup, which is this on the contact entity. Let's just get the custom fields on. So that's that FSO swimming time, which is the lookup to the newly created record we've associated with the contact. Obviously the percentage 27 is just the apostrophe symbol, and from that attribute, the swimming time it gets, obviously it's an array of, well, 1 in length, but 0 is the first index, gets the GUID, which is the ID property. It then does this jQuery to merge in the changes, and there's a success function where it just throws an alert to the form to say that it's updated the swimming time with the number of seconds value, and if it fails for any reason, we'll get an alert. What we need to do before we can obviously use the jQuery and the JSON objects and methods is to add the jQuery and JSON libraries to CRM, and then we have to load them onto the form by referencing them on the form properties. So I need to go to jQuery.com and download, and then I can download this compressed production, which is a minified version where all the white space has been removed, and I think it automatically shortens the variables. If you run I think there's a tool you can do to minify your own JavaScript libraries. So if I just copy that to my desktop, jQuery.110.2.min, that's downloaded. Now I can return to my solution, add existing item, go to my desktop, find that jQuery file, add that in, and I also need to get the JSON library, and the easiest way to get the JSON library is part of the SDK. So if I open the SDK folder, mine's extracted to the root of my C drive. I can do a search for this JSON2 file, and obviously there should all be the same versions, just in different sample code folders. So if I open, well, I'll copy that to my desktop as well. And again, I can return to my solution, right click web resources, add existing item, and find my JSON script file. So now I'm ready to right click and deploy both my updated, well, say all three, my updated update swimming time JS file. It includes the jQuery library now and JSON library. So if I right click and deploy, okay, so that's now deployed. So if I go back to my solution and refresh my click web resource, it should refresh. So I can now see the additional jQuery JSON libraries. So what I need to do on the contact form, as well as obviously adding my custom JavaScript library, I need to add the jQuery and JSON libraries, which is done by going to the form designer. If you click on form properties, that's a historic from a previous video. If I add, I think you can only do these one at a time, so if if I add the jQuery library first, then JSON, finally my update swimming time library. I believe it's advised to put these first in the load orders to guarantee they're loaded before you try to utilize any jQuery, but that's all you need to do to have access to the jQuery methods and functions that the dollar symbol uses and the JSON.stringify use, is to just have them present in the libraries that load with the form. You don't have to do any onload events or anything. They just, as long as they're present there, they'll load with the form, and then any calls to them from other JavaScript libraries will work successfully. So now we need to add an onChange event to this number of seconds. So if I double click the field, events, the only event a field has is the onChange. Obviously the form libraries will have the libraries we've just loaded. I can click on add and choose the relevant library. Obviously my function is in my update swimming time library, so you have to click on library and choose the relevant library for the function, and then I can copy the name from Visual Studio, paste it in. It's defaulted to enabled. OK that, save the form, publish it. Take a few seconds. Okay, that's now published. So if I now just close that existing contact record. So if I now go to my CRM contacts, so if I pick this A Babington, what I'll need to do, obviously, because that JavaScript library references the swimming time record, so I need to click on that and create a new one, which I'll just give test swimming time. Obviously the number of seconds is going to get populated from that onChange event, so if I save that and close, pick that for the lookup, and just save this record just to ensure it can be referenced. So if I now change this to 1800 seconds and tab out, we get an error. Hi, sorry about that. I was just trying to diagnose why that threw that error. There's a couple of issues. I'd put a capital I on the ID field, and my data set was actually swimming times plural set. So now that's redeployed. Let me just close these records down, republish my, because I've republished the JavaScript libraries. They need to be, I publish the customizations, which is one thing you need to remember whenever you redeploy JavaScript. You need to republish. It's different to plugins and workflows where they automatically replace the assembly. So let me go back to my workplace and A Babington record, put in a number of seconds. Okay, sorry about that additional error again. What it is because I'm remote and our actual CRM server name is just the NetBIOS name, that's short CRM 2011 dev3, not plus the .freelanceoff.local. I was getting authentication issues in the JavaScript, so basically now I'm connected with the shorter version. If I open A Babington, if I just show you beforehand, swimming time, number of seconds empty, number of minutes empty. If I put 1800, we get our success message, swimming time updated with 1800 seconds. And if I open that record, we can see the 1800 seconds we've just changed it to. If I change that to 2400, again, success message, open the related record, 2400. So the second part of Mark's question, well, part of Mark's question was that update would trigger a plugin registered against the swimming time entity. So we need to create a plugin registered on update of the seconds field to do a calculation of the number of minutes. So it was to show that how indirectly editing via a JavaScript change event would trigger the plugin. So I need to add, right click my project for plugins, add new item, class, calculate minutes, or calculate minutes will do. Right click, I'll add my using Microsoft.xrm.sdk. I can implement my iPlugin interface, set the access modifier public, implement the interface, delete my exception, go to one of my previous plugins. We'll take everything up to the start of the try block, paste that, and I'll go and take the catch blocks. So we should now have a empty plugin that's creating the relevant contexts and doing checks on whether the input parameter contains a target and if it's an entity, and then we're casting that into an entity reference type for a late bound type. Obviously it's an update message, but in this instance we now want to register it on the FSO swimming times plural. Let me just confirm that's right. Open my solution, open my entities. Yes, FSO swimming times, logical name. So we can just ensure that it is only registered against that entity. And system.serviceModel namespace for the fault exception. Okay, so now again, obviously we need to do the registration file. We can copy our plugin section. You've probably seen me do this in previous videos. Remove our step, and we can just change the description and name to something more relevant. The class itself is called calculate minutes, so I can replace that in the name and the type name. 8 4 4 4 and then 12 zeros. So that should be sufficient to register that. So if I deploy, okay, that's now deployed. So we can see the additional, the GUID, and we can now register our additional step by expanding CRM Explorer, expanding the organization, expanding plugin assemblies. Obviously that's, you can see it's grey at the moment, the workflow, because I've removed it from the register file, so it doesn't believe it's part of this solution. So my calculate minutes, right click, add step, and obviously the swimming time entity. On an update message, when in the context of the initiating or calling user, we'll do it pre-operation. So again, as the JavaScript updates the number of seconds value, we'll simultaneously do the calculation, add the number of minutes to the attribute collection for the entity, and it'll be written in with the main database operation. Because it's an update message, we'll also filter it to only trigger on the number of seconds that we're editing. We don't need to use the pre-image and post-image for this because we're not updating multiple values and need to concern ourselves with only one of them being updated, etc., as you can see in my previous video. So if I OK that, we now see the additional step, the usual warning because I had the register file open to reload it, and we can now see the additional step. So I'll deploy. Okay, so that's now deployed. If I open my solution just to confirm the plugin assemblies, expand and click my plugins, I can see my calculate minutes, and I should also see my additional step. So pre-swimming time update. So now we need to add the logic, which is very simple. We just do a check. Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. I realised I hadn't regenerated the early bound class library since adding that custom entity in those fields. So I've just generated that from the CRM SVC util. So I'll delete the previous version, add existing item, where my SDK is extracted and my output path was my bin folder. So now that's added, I should have my swimming times library type. So what I need to do, sorry, getting ahead of myself here. Yeah, apologies for the jumping around. This is the trouble with doing live demos with no preparation, that there's a few mistakes here and there, but it's I guess it shows the warts and all element that it's not all pre-staged and regurgitated in parrot fashion. So I need to cast my entity to an early bound type using the toEntity method. And then I can do a check on the property for the number of seconds to ensure it has got a value before we try and do a calculation with it. So if I take my swimming time dot FSO number of seconds, so this is the value that's being written in by the JavaScript from the contact. So if I check if that's not equal to null, then I can do my calculation or do a straight right creation of the number of minutes attribute, which won't exist. Well, it will exist in the early bound type, but it will be set to null at present. In the attribute collections of the late bound type, it wouldn't exist. If that makes sense, I hope. Equals the number of seconds attribute divided by 60, and that's a integer. This is a decimal, but because it's not reducing, obviously you have to cast if you're losing accuracy. So if it was a conversion of a long or a float or a decimal to an integer, because you lose information, you have to cast explicitly. Sorry, but that should add that number of minutes to the entity, and then the main database operation will write that, and that's as simple as that plugin needs to be. So if I deploy once again, okay, so that's deployed the plugin now. So let me just recap. So we have registered an on-change event of the number of seconds field on the contact. We have let me just show you the contact. So we've took this A Babington, we've created this swimming time record that's related. The on-change event of the number of seconds updates this associated record's number of seconds field to the same value, and we've just written a plugin which will, just taking a second or so to open. So the onChange event will update this value, and the plugin that we've registered on the swimming time entity update message that's registered only on a change of this field will do a calculation of the number of minutes. So if I change that to 1800, we get our success message. So from a contact entity, we've changed the field. Our JavaScript has updated this associated swimming time entity record, and there you can see our number of minutes calculated. If I change it to 2700 seconds, success message from our JavaScript. Look at the associated swimming time record. There's our 45 minutes. So I'm hoping that was what Mark was referring to when he talked about indirect triggering of plugins. I mean, as far as the web service is concerned, anytime anything updates a record, if you've got a plugin registered on an update message, it doesn't care if it's from an external data tool or the REST endpoint, the SOAP endpoint, they're all using the web services. It will trigger your plugins that are registered. So any comments or queries or requests, feel free to post them below. Thanks for watching.